The first hymn had already begun when I realized she wasn't coming. I scanned the chapel again, slower this time, in case I'd missed her. But the front row seat, meant for Julian's wife, remained untouched. 42 others sat in respectful stillness, heads bowed, hands folded. Her seat stared back at me, sharp and obvious. No message, no call, no excuse. The priest's voice wove through the air, soft and rehearsed. I barely heard it. My fingers stayed curled around the folded program in my lap, pressing into the paper like it could hold me upright. Julian's photo looked up at me. A simple headshot from last year. Suit jacket, easy smile, eyes too kind for the world that took him. They said it was instant. No pain, just a truck, a bad corner, and a metal guardrail that didn't hold. That's what the hospital told me. That's what I made myself believe when I stood over the closed casket. But Olivia didn't stand beside me. Not even at the burial. She was supposed to fly in from Phoenix the day before. I had offered to pick her up myself, even arranged the flowers she liked, callous, pale yellow ones. But she never called, never responded. The chapel emptied slow like syrup. Friends squeezed my hand. Someone placed a casserole in the church freezer. I nodded, smiled, thanked them with a voice that didn't feel like mine. Back at the house, I sat with my neighbor, Marianne, who'd helped coordinate the food. She was fussing over coffee filters when she glanced at her phone, frowned, then handed it to me. You should see this. I didn't want to. I looked anyway. A champagne flute, a bare shoulder, a man who looked too familiar. Miguel from the summer crew. Olivia in a sun hat, laughing into the camera. Her caption, "Enjoy life while you can," posted 3 hours after Julian was lowered into the ground. I didn't speak. I just stared at the screen as the sun dipped behind the window frame and my phone began to vibrate from the counter. A message. From Julian's number. I didn't sleep. Not really. My body lay still, but my mind kept circling that photo and the message that followed. By morning, I was already in the car halfway to Julian and Olivia's house before the sun lifted over the neighborhood rooftops. The lawn hadn't been cut in over a week. The mailbox was stuffed with flyers, bills, and a few magazines. I recognized ones Olivia used to leave on the coffee table without reading. The sprinklers clicked on just as I stepped over the walkway. They sputtered unevenly, soaking a row of dying succulents along the fence. The side gate was cracked open. Not wide, just enough to suggest someone hadn't bothered closing it. I pushed it gently. It moaned. Inside, the air was stale, but oddly sweet. Someone had used surface spray, lemon something, but underneath it, there was another smell. Faint like an old bottle of aftershave opened too long and left to sour. It didn't belong to Julian. That much I knew. Everything else was untouched. The couch pillows were still fluffed. A half-eaten protein bar sat beside Julian's keys tray, but the keys weren't there. Neither was his watch. I moved to the back door and stepped into the garden. The winter sun hadn't done the plants any favors, but there, tucked in the compost bin, I saw it 2 champagne corks and a resort keycard. It was still clipped to the leather tag, Hale View Resort. Room 241. I pulled out my phone and took a photo. My hand didn't shake, but my stomach twisted. I opened the sliding door and walked straight to Julian's bedroom. His closet door was ajar. I knew what to look for. His favorite suitcase. The brown hard-shell one I gave him when he landed his first tech job was gone. The drawer where he kept his passport and travel files was empty too. And then my phone vibrated again. Just once. A message. Unknown number, but the photo beside it made my knees buckle. Mom, come to the house now. Don't tell anyone. It was Julian's face, smiling, alive. The front door opened before I even knocked. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. But then he stepped into view. Julian. He looked thinner, like he hadn't eaten properly in days. There was a cut near his eyebrow, half healed, and a yellowing bruise along his collarbone. But it was him, my son. Alive. He didn't speak. Just pulled me into a hug so tight I could feel every rib in his chest. I held on longer than I should have, afraid he might disappear again if I let go. "Don't scream," he whispered into my shoulder. "It's not over yet." We stood in the kitchen, neither of us quite knowing how to start. He poured water with shaking hands and drank like it hurt. His voice came out in low, broken pieces. "She said we needed time apart, that she booked me a room to clear my head." I didn't think anything of it. His eyes flicked toward the back window. I woke up in the passenger seat of my car. Parked, not crashed. But my head, everything was spinning. I blacked out again. He rubbed his temples like the memory hurt to hold. When I came to, I was in a storage room. Someone had dumped my things inside wallet, phone, even my shoes. The crash they reported never happened. Olivia staged it. I sank into the chair across from him, unable to form a single word. His next sentence didn't make it easier. "She tried to kill me." There was no hesitation in his voice, just something cold and steady, like he'd had too long to sit with the truth. "She filed the claim, took the money. And she's not alone. Miguel, remember him from the yard crew. He's with her now. They were planning this." I wanted to argue to call it paranoia or stress or anything else. But all I could think about was that smiling photo on the beach, the room key in the garden, the empty closet drawer. Julian reached into his backpack and slid a manila folder toward me. Inside was the first proof. Julian motioned for me to follow him down the basement stairs. The overhead light buzzed as it flickered on. Against the far wall, beside an old folding table, sat a small steel lockbox. He knelt down, entered a 4-digit code, and opened the lid like he'd done it 100 times. Inside was a thumb drive, a stack of printouts, and a manila envelope thick with folded papers. He handed them to me, wordlessly. The first page was a bank transaction summary. A direct deposit for $870,000 labeled Life Claim Disby, Julian Quaid. The payout had been approved 2 days after the supposed crash. I flipped through the documents, each one more damning than the last. Olivia's forged signature on the insurance forms notarized under a name I didn't recognize. But the curve of the O and the final tail on the E, I knew them. She'd copied her signature from their marriage license. Same ink flow, same spacing. She booked the resort a week before the accident, Julian said, leaning against the water heater like he needed it to hold him up. She told me I was burnt out, that I needed space, offered to grab Thai takeout, and said she'd meet me later. He looked away, jaw tight. That's the last thing I remember. Woke up with the seatbelt digging into my ribs and no shoes. She left my phone with the ringer off. I guess it was enough. I wanted to call the police right then. I wanted flashing lights and handcuffs and someone official to say this nightmare would end. But I looked at my son, the way his hand trembled as he gathered the papers, and I understood why he hadn't gone public. "She'll run," he said. "She's already halfway gone." I pressed the envelope flat against my chest. "You need a lawyer." "I already have one," he said. "But not for this part. Not yet." I followed him back upstairs, my thoughts tangled and hot. By the time we reached the living room, I remembered something he'd signed before surgery last year. Something that changed everything. I spent that night at the dining table with every lamp in the house turned on. The papers Julian had shown me were spread across the surface, overlapping like pieces of a puzzle I was terrified to solve. I highlighted dates, cross-checked signatures, circled transfers, and copied phone logs until the ink on my pen ran thin. The more I pieced together, the clearer it became. Olivia hadn't just planned to leave, she'd planned to erase him entirely. Around 3 in the morning, I opened an old file drawer looking for a stapler, and instead found something else. A packet of pre-surgery forms Julian had signed last winter. His handwriting, careful and slanted, sat beside the phrase durable power of attorney. He'd named me without hesitation as his legal fallback. The realization hit me so sharply I had to sit down. If he was legally gone, and she was trying to take everything in his name, then I was the only person with authority to disrupt it. At sunrise, I called our family attorney, Mr. Alden. I read him the expiration date, the clauses, the notarization line. He confirmed it quietly, almost cautiously. It's valid, Selma. Fully valid. That was all I needed. By noon, I'd frozen the joint account Olivia had drained. The bank representative asked 3 times if I understood the implications, and I assured him I did. 30 minutes later, I contacted the insurance carrier and reported suspected fraud tied to the claim. They escalated it immediately. After that, I reached out to the mortgage lender submitting documentation showing forged signatures on multiple forms. I moved fast because I had to. Every hour she walked free felt like another hour stolen from my son. By the end of the second day, the groundwork was laid. Her credit lines were flagged. Her transfers were locked. The pending payout was put under review, and Olivia had no idea. Her latest post was a photo of her lounging in a private cabana, sunglasses, pushed up, a drink in hand, writing something about fresh starts and letting go. She was still celebrating when her first declined charge appeared and my phone lit up again with Julian's name. She must have been somewhere loud when it started, maybe ordering dessert or handing her card to a bored waiter who didn't recognize her name yet. The first decline probably made her laugh. A glitch, she'd assume. Then came the second. Then the third. All 5 cards. Declined. Back in Pennsylvania, I sat at the kitchen table with my reading glasses on and a fresh pot of coffee going cold beside me. My email pinged with each reversal like a drumbeat. One by one, the charges evaporated. $640 for airfare, $1,215 for spa packages, $800 to $700 for a diamond bracelet I'd never seen. Gone. The payment processors flagged the activity as inconsistent. The fraud team I spoke to the day before didn't ask many questions once I gave them the timeline. Olivia had used Julian's presumed death to access nearly everything he had, and more that wasn't hers to begin with. Miguel's number stopped working by late afternoon. Julian tried twice and then gave up. His face tightened when I asked if he thought Miguel had ever loved her. He didn't answer, just shook his head and pulled the blinds shut. Olivia must have known something was unraveling, but not the full picture. She posted a photo later that evening, a pool behind her. The caption read, "Sometimes paradise turns cold." I didn't respond, didn't comment or message or even screenshot it. I simply powered my phone off and left it on the counter. The attorney had already filed fraud claims in both Julian's and my name, attaching copies of the insurance records, financial statements, and forged documents. The last step was a federal filing, and that was already in motion. She wouldn't know until it was too late. I told Julian I'd be going by the house the next morning to collect the last of his mail. He offered to come, but I said no. He needed rest, and I needed space to see it all one last time. He handed me the key quietly, then paused like something else had just come back to him. He walked to the cabinet drawer, pulled something out, and placed it in my hand. The next morning, Julian met me at the house after all. He said he couldn't stay in the apartment any longer, that the walls felt too close, and his thoughts kept circling the same dark places. I didn't argue. We walked through the entryway together, careful, quiet, almost as if Olivia could still be hiding behind a door. He stopped suddenly in the living room, staring at the keys in my hand. "The dash cam," he said. It was still recording the day I disappeared. We went straight to the garage. The car sat there as if nothing had happened. The hood dusty, the tires slightly deflated. Julian leaned through the driver's door and reached up beneath the frame of the rearview mirror. His fingers brushed something, and he pulled down the small device with a click. The battery light blinked red, almost dead, but not quite. I carried it to the kitchen table while he found the charging cord. Within minutes, the footage loaded. We watched together, shoulders tense, breaths shallow. The camera showed Julian getting into the passenger seat at what must have been the strip mall parking lot near home. Olivia walked around to the driver's side and glanced straight at the lens, unaware it was angled just enough to catch her face. She opened the door, leaned in, and said something we couldn't hear. Julian slumped sideways moments later. She didn't panic. She didn't call for help. She circled the car again, tightened the seatbelt across his chest, and wiped the steering wheel with her sleeve. After that, she walked away. Hours passed. A tow truck arrived. The driver hooked the car and hauled it toward the warehouse district. No crash, no skid marks, no guardrail. Just a staged scene carefully constructed, waiting to be discovered. I sent the footage to the private investigator I'd hired the week before. He forwarded it to his federal contact within the hour. By late afternoon, we received confirmation a case number had been issued and an investigator had been assigned. That same evening, as we sat at Julian's table, the phone buzzed with a short message from the PI. She tried to fly home. She never made it past the gate. They brought her in wearing the same designer travel set she'd posted about a week earlier, sweatpants with gold trim, a matching hoodie, her sunglasses still pushed into her hair like nothing had changed. But in that room, under federal lighting, nothing about Olivia looked polished. She denied everything. Claimed Julian had orchestrated the whole thing, that he'd fallen into depression, faked his own disappearance, and asked her to go along with it. She said the money was supposed to be temporary, that he promised to come back. The agents let her talk. Then they showed her the emails. One dated 6 weeks before the incident, a wire request she sent to Miguel's account labeled Phase 2. Another with a list of insurance numbers typed in a separate font, copied and pasted. They brought up the transfers Miguel made after the payout hit. He'd withdrawn cash from ATMs in Oahu the same day Olivia posted her first beach photo. Over $40,000 gone before breakfast. And then there was the ID. A fake license with Julian's name and Miguel's photo found tucked into her hotel safe next to a burner phone. She stopped talking after that. I didn't go to the hearing. Julian said he wanted to see it through. I sat in the car instead, watching the trees across the lot bend in the wind, waiting for the call. He came out pale and quiet, holding the folded court notice like it was something fragile. She didn't even flinch, he said. Just kept looking at her nails. He didn't cry. I think he'd already used up every kind of grief. We drove home with the windows cracked, the breeze loud enough to drown out our thoughts. The news came later that week. Olivia would be charged with attempted manslaughter, federal insurance fraud conspiracy to commit financial theft and identity falsification. It sounded like a headline, almost surreal. But the woman who had once stood in my kitchen asking about holiday tablecloths had tried to erase my only child. Julian didn't speak much that night, but when he did, his voice was steady, as he asked to go home. The first thing I did when Julian came home was open every window in the place. The air felt heavy, as if Olivia's chaos still clung to the walls. I let the breeze sweep through the rooms, while Julian waited on the porch, staring across the street, like he was trying to recognize a neighborhood he'd never fully noticed before. I scrubbed the kitchen until the counters felt smooth again. Her mugs went into a donation box. Her perfumes, half used and overly sweet, straight into the trash. I left the things. Julian paused over the framed photo from his college graduation, a navy jacket he said he might want again someday, a book he'd forgotten he owned. Everything else could go. We didn't talk about Olivia. Not directly. When the topic drifted close, Julian's voice would falter, and I'd change the subject. It didn't feel like avoidance, just necessity. Some wounds require quiet before they can be named. In the evenings after dinner, he'd sit on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, watching the last of the daylight sink behind the houses. I joined him sometimes. Neither of us speaking, just breathing the same air, listening to the distant hum of cars on the main road. The quiet between us felt like something new, something closer to healing than silence had ever been. I started baking again. Small things he used to love when he was a boy: walnut, bread butter cookies, simple casseroles that filled the house with warmth. He never asked why I was suddenly in the kitchen so much, and I never said it out loud. He needed comfort, and this was the way I knew. The legal fallout mounted quickly. There were fees and consultations and filings I didn't want Julian worrying about, so I paid what I could and arranged the rest. He had enough on his shoulders. One night, after sitting together on the porch in the fading light, he finally broke the stillness. "I still don't know why she did it," he said softly, not looking at me. I didn't answer. There was no single reason that would ever be enough. Instead, I touched his shoulder, and told him we had somewhere to go in the morning. I found it still online, buried in her profile, under a reel of bright filters and borrowed captions. Olivia's final post before they detained her. She was on a balcony, a champagne glass raised mid-toast, the ocean behind her, gleaming like something she thought she'd earned. Her sunglasses caught the sun just enough to hide the expression in her eyes, but I knew the look by now, calculated, careless, untouchable. The caption read, "Enjoy life while you can." I didn't screenshot it. I printed it. One clean copy, no edits. I slid it into a manila folder and labeled it in black ink "Evidence." Closed. Then I tucked it away into the old filing cabinet in the hallway next to the folders that held Julian's childhood photos. School certificates, birthday cards from his grandparents. The things that had weight. The things that stayed. On Julian's birthday, I made him a walnut tart, the one he used to ask for when he was 8, and thought sugar was its own food group. He smiled when he saw it, not wide, but real. Ate every slice over the course of 2 days and never once said the word diet or guilt. He's slower now, but steadier. He waters his own plants, answers calls when he's ready, and walks around the block in the morning like he's measuring the world again. The house feels like his again, little by little. A new gardener started last week. Not from a company, just a neighbor's cousin looking for weekend work. Young, polite, careful with the hydrangeas. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't hover. When I offered him lemonade, he said thank you without glancing at his phone. From the porch, I watched him trim the hedges with quiet precision. When he caught me watching, he gave a small wave, and I returned it before stepping back inside. There was nothing urgent left to do. No fires to put out. No lies to untangle. Just the smell of pastry still hanging in the kitchen and a vase of fresh branches catching the light near the sink.